Father Miguel sat alone in his dimly lit office, the glow from the monitor casting long shadows across the room. The recent wave of burglaries in the parish had left him uneasy, compelling him to review footage from hidden cameras night after night. His hope was slim, but he prayed for even the smallest clue that might reveal the culprits. Hours crawled by, filled with nothing but the usual flickering lights and shifting shadows. Just as Miguel considered giving up for the night, a familiar figure appeared on the screen. It was Cardinal Antonio Tagle. The cardinal moved with purpose, completely unaware of the camera capturing his every action. What happened next left Father Miguel frozen in his chair, his heart racing in disbelief. 2 weeks earlier, the town was alive with excitement. Word had spread quickly. Cardinal Antonio Tagle was coming to visit their parish. The news ignited a spark of anticipation in everyone, from the devout churchgoers to those who rarely set foot inside. His reputation for compassion and humility had reached far beyond the church walls, making him a figure admired by all. The days leading up to his arrival were a flurry of preparation. The pews were polished, the courtyard swept clean, and decorations carefully arranged to honor such a distinguished guest. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that everybody has a wonderful start of the new ecclesiastical year. Welcome back to St. Sophia's. Today we're here, with the help of Cosmos Philly, to show you what's the newest thing going on here at St. Sophia in terms of our church, Father Miguel announced. Families began arriving hours before the service, eager to secure a spot close enough to see the cardinal in person. The church filled quickly, and soon even the courtyard overflowed with people craning their necks for a glimpse of the man whose presence seemed to carry a sense of hope. Father Miguel stood by the main entrance, fidgeting with his collar. Despite the cool evening breeze, his palms were damp with nerves. He had met Cardinal Tagle before, but this occasion felt different, more significant. The burden of the recent burglaries weighed on the parish, and Miguel silently prayed that the cardinal's visit might bring some much-needed relief. The sound of gravel crunching under tires signaled the arrival of the sleek black car. Miguel took a deep breath and stepped forward as the vehicle came to a stop. The cardinal emerged, offering his signature warm smile and a slight bow to the gathered crowd. "Your Eminence," Miguel greeted, bowing deeply. The cardinal's presence seemed to ripple through the crowd like a wave of calm. Parishioners who had been tense and reserved due to the recent crimes now greeted each other with warmth and optimism. It was as if his arrival alone had lifted their spirits. Inside the church, the cardinal moved through the sea of people with ease and grace. He shook hands, offered blessings, and spoke to each person with genuine interest, making them feel seen and valued. Father Miguel watched from the edge of the crowd, filled with admiration. Despite his high rank, Cardinal Tagle carried himself with the humility of a servant. His charisma was as natural as the air he breathed. Yet, as Miguel observed, something caught his eye. Clara, the church housekeeper, stood near the side aisle. Normally quiet and composed, she seemed unusually tense. Her hands fidgeted nervously, and she kept glancing toward the cardinal with an expression Miguel couldn't quite place. Was it fear, concern, or something else entirely? It was subtle, but it unsettled him enough to make a mental note to speak with her later. For now, though, the focus remained on the cardinal and the transformative energy his visit brought to the parish. Little did Miguel know, this was just the beginning of a series of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew. Clara lingered in the shadows near the sacristy, her hands clasped tightly together. Her gaze flitted nervously toward Cardinal Tagle, her posture rigid and tense, as though she were bracing herself for a moment she dreaded. When the cardinal finally moved closer, she hesitated for a brief second before stepping forward. In a hushed tone, she whispered something to him, her words inaudible from where Father Miguel stood. The cardinal nodded slightly in response, his face a mask of calm, revealing nothing of the exchange. Without another word, Clara turned and exited the room abruptly, her pale face etched with an emotion Miguel couldn't quite decipher. Fear perhaps, or guilt. Whatever it was, it unsettled him. Miguel's stomach churned as he tried to make sense of what he had just witnessed. Clara had always been composed and discreet, never drawing attention to herself. Yet here she was, behaving in a way that seemed entirely out of character, especially in the presence of someone as respected and revered as Cardinal Tagle. Miguel attempted to brush off his unease, chalking it up to nerves over the day's important events. But the memory of Clarara's fleeting words and the cardinal's cryptic response refused to leave him. A nagging suspicion gnawed at the edges of his mind, hinting that their interaction carried a significance he couldn't yet grasp. As the evening progressed, Miguel tried his best to focus on his duties, greeting parishioners and ensuring the cardinal's visit unfolded smoothly. Still, his thoughts kept circling back to Clara. What could she have said to the cardinal? Why had she appeared so rattled? Miguel pushed these questions aside, determined not to let his own overthinking spoil what should have been a joyous occasion. It was nearing midnight when the shrill buzz of Miguel's phone shattered the silence of his modest bedroom. Startled, he fumbled for the device on his nightstand, squinting at the screen through blurry eyes. The caller ID displayed the name of the security company responsible for monitoring the recently installed cameras at the church. A cold knot of anxiety formed in his chest. After weeks of uneventful surveillance, a call at this hour could only mean one thing: trouble. "Father Miguel," came the operator's calm yet urgent voice. "We've detected some unusual activity on the church premises. You may want to review the footage from camera 3 near the east corridor." Miguel hung up, his heart pounding. Pulling on a jacket over his nightclothes, he hurried toward the small office where the security monitors were housed. The church was eerily silent, its long corridors cloaked in shadows. Moonlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting fractured colors onto the floor, but the beauty of the scene did little to ease Miguel's growing unease. Once seated in the glow of the monitors, Miguel navigated to the footage from earlier in the evening. At first, the screen displayed nothing out of the ordinary: empty hallways, locked doors, and the stillness that always settled over the church after hours. But as the timestamp crept past 11 p.m., a figure emerged from the shadows, its movements deliberate and cautious. Miguel's breath caught in his throat. The figure stepped further into the frame, and the dim light revealed the unmistakable form of Cardinal Luis Antonio. Miguel leaned closer to the screen, his pulse quickening. The cardinal's movements were deliberate, almost furtive, as though he were wary of being seen. He paused every few steps to glance over his shoulder, scanning the darkness with a weariness that didn't match the composed, benevolent man Miguel had seen earlier that day. Miguel's chest tightened as he watched the footage unfold. What was the cardinal doing wandering the church at this hour? The more Miguel watched, the more troubling the scene became. The cardinal's actions were precise, almost as if he was searching for something or someone. Miguel couldn't shake the feeling that there was far more to this late-night excursion than met the eye. And as the footage continued, what he saw next left him gripping the edge of the desk, his unease now fully transformed into alarm. As Cardinal Tagle approached Clara's quarters, he paused just outside her door. His hand hovered over the doorknob, hesitating for a brief moment. He glanced down the dimly lit hallway one last time, ensuring no one was watching. Satisfied that he was alone, he turned the knob and slipped inside, disappearing into the room. Father Miguel sat frozen, his eyes fixed on the monitor. His mind raced, struggling to reconcile the image of the respected and revered cardinal with a man moving so covertly. A wave of doubt and confusion washed over him. His first instinct was to give the cardinal the benefit of the doubt. Surely there had to be an innocent explanation for his actions. But the secrecy, the cautious glances over his shoulder, and the odd timing, all of it gnawed at Miguel's resolve. He replayed the footage, scrutinizing every detail. The cardinal's movements were deliberate, almost calculated. His behavior wasn't just cautious, it was methodical. Miguel leaned back in his chair, his unease growing with each passing second. The late hour and the cardinal's choice to visit Clarara's room of all places didn't make sense. What could he be doing in Clarara's room? Miguel muttered to himself. He tried to brush aside the darker possibilities creeping into his thoughts, but they clung stubbornly, refusing to be silenced. His rational mind sought explanations. Perhaps the cardinal needed something urgent from Clara, or maybe he was delivering news best handled in private. Yet the evidence on the screen suggested otherwise. There was an undeniable air of secrecy in the cardinal's every move. After 30 minutes of replaying the footage and reaching no satisfying conclusion, Miguel turned off the monitor and rubbed his temples. He resolved to keep an eye on the situation, gathering more information before jumping to conclusions. Deep down, though, an annoying unease lingered. The Cardinals. Sure, here's your complete script converted into a single paragraph, without skipping or changing any word. Actions hinted at something far more complex than Miguel could yet comprehend. He tried to shake the feeling as he left the office, but the church's corridors seemed darker than usual, the silence more oppressive. Miguel told himself he was doing the right thing by waiting, but a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that his hesitation might come at a cost he couldn't yet foresee the next. Morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting warm colors on the church walls, but despite the golden glow, the atmosphere inside was heavy. Whispers rippled through the congregation, accompanied by furtive glances and uneasy expressions. Somehow word of the Cardinals' late-night movements had spread. Miguel guessed the source was a security company, though he had hoped the matter would remain contained. Now it was slipping into the parish collective consciousness, threatening to spiral out of control. I heard he was seen near Clara's quarters. A woman whispered, her voice barely audible, but filled with curiosity. Surely it's nothing, replied another, though her tone carried an edge of doubt. Cardinal Tagle is a man of God. There must be an explanation. But not everyone was so charitable. A gruff voice cut through the murmurings. A man is a man, he said bluntly. Clergy or not sneaking around at that raises questions. Father Miguel moved through the crowd, his heart sinking with each passing comment. Every word he overheard felt like a stone added to the weight already pressing on his shoulders. He had hoped the incident would remain a private concern, something he could observe quietly while piecing together the truth. Instead, it had become the talk of the parish, threatening to escalate into scandal. The unease was palpable, feeding off the whispers and speculation. Miguel's attempts to reassure himself that he was doing the right thing by waiting and watching began to falter. For the first time, he wondered if he had made a mistake by delaying action. Whatever the truth behind the Cardinals' actions, it was clear that the matter was far from contained, and Miguel couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to spiral in ways he wasn't prepared to handle. Father Miguel's uncertainty only deepened the burden he carried was immense. He couldn't ignore what he'd seen, but confronting Cardinal Tagle without solid evidence felt unthinkable. The cardinal wasn't just a senior clergyman, he was a revered figure in the church. A false accusation could cause irreparable harm, not only to Tagle's reputation, but also to the church's image and Miguel's own position. Yet remaining silent weighed heavily on his conscience. His thoughts turned to Clara, always a quiet presence. Today, she seemed like a shadow of herself. She avoided eye contact, her shoulders hunched, as if bearing an invisible weight. Clara declined to join the other nuns in morning prayers, choosing instead to keep to herself, her gaze fixed on the floor. Miguel watched her from a distance, noting her growing isolation. Could her behavior be tied to the cardinal's late-night visits, or was his mind jumping to conclusions, building a story where there was none? That evening, Miguel sat once again before the security monitor, the dim glow of the screen illuminating his furrowed brow. His hands trembled slightly as he replayed the footage from the previous night's. Frame by frame, it revealed the same troubling pattern. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, leaving his quarters in the dead of night, walking deliberately through the church corridors, and pausing briefly outside Clara's door before entering. Each visit lasted over an hour, sometimes two, before he returned to his own quarters. Miguel's unease turned to alarm when he spotted a particularly unsettling moment. One time the footage showed the cardinal beckoning Clara toward him. She hesitated before moving closer, her posture tense. As she leaned forward, her body language was cautious, her movements deliberate. When she eventually left the room, her eyes were rimmed red, as though she had been crying. This wasn't an isolated incident. The consistency of the cardinal's actions suggested something intentional and deeply secretive. Miguel's thoughts swirled with conflict. He wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, but the secrecy cast a long shadow of doubt over any hopeful assumptions. For hours, Miguel sat in silence, weighing his options. To confront Cardinal Tagle meant risking everything: his position, his reputation, and possibly the stability of the entire parish. Yet to do nothing felt like a betrayal of his own integrity and of the trust placed in him by the parishioners he was trapped in. An impossible dilemma. The sharp buzz of his phone interrupted his thoughts, startling him. He hesitated before picking it up, dreading what might come next. The caller ID displayed the security company's name, and a sinking feeling settled in his chest. Father Miguel, the operator said, their tone cautious yet firm. We've reviewed additional footage and noticed a recurring pattern of activity. Given the circumstances, we feel obligated to inform you that this behavior is highly irregular and may warrant further action." Miguel thanked the caller and hung up, his heart heavy. If even the security company had flagged the Cardinal's actions, how much longer could he justify his inaction? His gaze drifted back to the monitor, where a frozen image of Tagle outside Clarara's door stared back at him. The Cardinal's expression was calm, but the deliberate secrecy of his movements betrayed an unsettling purpose. Miguel leaned back in his chair, the weight of his inevitable decision pressing down like an iron shroud. He thought of the parishioners and their whispered suspicions, the trust they placed in the clergy. He thought of Clara, whose withdrawn demeanor hinted at an inner struggle he couldn't yet comprehend. And he thought of Cardinal Tagle, a man admired by so many whose reputation now hung by a fragile thread. As dawn broke, casting a soft golden light over the church, Miguel made his decision. He couldn't ignore what he had seen. The truth needed to be uncovered, but it had to be done with care and respect. An hour later, Miguel stood outside Cardinal Tagle's quarters, his heart pounding so loudly he feared it might echo through the quiet hallway. He clutched his rosary tightly, in one hand a small gesture to steady his nerves. Taking a deep breath, he knocked lightly. The door opened almost immediately, and there stood the Cardinal, his face calm and inviting. "Father Miguel." Tagle greeted warmly, his voice steady. "What brings you here at this hour?" Miguel swallowed hard and stepped inside. The room was modest, in keeping with the Cardinal's reputation for humility, but Miguel barely noticed his focus was entirely on the man before him. "Your Eminence," Miguel began, his voice trembling slightly, "there is something I must address with you, though it pains me to do so." Tagle gestured for him to sit, his serene expression unchanged. "Please speak freely." Miguel hesitated, choosing his words with care. "Over the past several nights, I have reviewed the security footage. It has come to my attention that you have been visiting Clarara's quarters late at night. The secrecy, the timing, it has raised questions I can no longer ignore." For a moment, silence hung between them, like a heavy veil. The Cardinal's face remained calm, but Miguel's heart raced as he awaited a response to Miguel's surprise. Cardinal Tagle's expression softened, not with anger or defensiveness, but with understanding. The Cardinal folded his hands and spoke gently. "Sister Clara has been struggling with severe depression," he began. "When I arrived, she approached me privately on my first day here, seeking guidance. She feels isolated, burdened by guilt she cannot shake, and overwhelmed by the expectations placed upon her." Miguel's breath caught as the Cardinal's words sank in. Images of Clarara's pale face, her hunched posture, and her avoidance of the other nuns replayed vividly in his mind. The signs were there all along, but Miguel had been too preoccupied with suspicion to see them clearly. "The late-night meetings," Tagle continued, "were at her request. She felt safer speaking under the cover of darkness, away from prying eyes and curious questions. I agreed to meet her then, not to hide anything, but to protect her privacy and dignity. She feared how others might perceive her struggles." Miguel stared at the Cardinal, the weight of his own assumptions crashing down on him. He felt a pang of guilt as he recalled how easily he had let whispers and his own fears cloud his judgment. "I understand your concern, Father Miguel," Tagle said, his kind voice steady, "but sometimes our roles demand discretion. My only intention was to provide her solace and spiritual counsel." Relief washed over Miguel, though it was accompanied by a sense of shame. He had doubted the Cardinal's integrity, assuming the worst instead of seeking the truth. Lowering his head, Miguel said softly, "I am sorry, Your Eminence, I allowed doubt to blind me." Tagle placed a reassuring hand on Miguel's shoulder. "We are all human, Father Miguel. Even in our faith, fear can creep, and what matters is that we act with humility and seek the truth, as you have done." As Miguel left the Cardinal's quarters, a sense of peace began to settle over him. Still, it was tempered by the realization of how easily appearances could deceive. He resolved to approach future situations with a more open heart, understanding how damaging assumptions could be, not only to himself but to others. That afternoon, Clara approached Father Miguel in the quiet stillness of the chapel. Her movements were tentative, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Father, for understanding and keeping my struggles private," she said, her words carrying the weight of relief. Miguel nodded, humbled by her trust. "You're not alone, Clara," he replied gently. "We're here to help you carry that burden." Her lips curled into a faint smile, a glimmer of light returning to her weary expression as she walked away. Miguel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He resolved to approach future challenges with both caution and compassion, knowing that mistrust, even when could exact a heavy toll. As the chapel fell silent again, Miguel reflected on the lesson he had learned. Appearances, he realized, could be deceiving, but understanding and empathy could illuminate even the darkest corners of doubt. Have you ever found yourself making assumptions and expecting the worst only to discover the truth was far different? Share your experiences with us in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time for more thought-provoking discussions. Catch you in the next video.